"He's just the IT guy," Graham Weston said with an easy laugh, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. The room chuckled, save for one person, Dominic Carter, the lead investor from Carter Biofund Ventures. His brow lifted slightly, more curious than amused. I stood at the edge of the glass conference room, tablet in hand, watching as Graham launched into a high-gloss presentation about Apex Neural Systems expansion into biometric AI, the same slides I'd designed, the same projections I'd modeled, but no mention of my name, not once. The sting should have been sharper. Once Graham and I were equals, now I was the guy they called when the internet dropped or the projector froze. I offered a tight smile, feigning neutrality, and took my place behind the coffee service, because apparently someone needed to check the cables. Dominic glanced at me again, this time longer, as if reading between the lines. I offered him a subtle nod and turned toward the door. I had no reason to stay. My part in the show was over, but I paused just long enough to catch Graham's voice, echoing, "We're the future of neural tech. I lead the vision. The rest is just execution." Funny. He had no idea that this morning, just before the meeting, he'd signed off on a series of routine compliance updates I'd prepped with my lawyer, one of which quietly transferred 55% controlling interest in Apex to me as co-founder through a clause he never thought to question. As I stepped into the elevator, I didn't smile out of vindication. I smiled because the game had already shifted, and Graham Weston, still standing in that conference room, didn't even know he'd already lost. 5 years ago, Apex Neural Systems was nothing more than an idea scribbled on a napkin at a tech mixer in downtown Austin. I'd just given a demo at the South by Southwest Innovation Showcase, an AI algorithm capable of interpreting electrical brain signals in real time. Graham Weston approached me afterward, champagne in hand, his smile full of opportunity. He had the polish, the pitch, and a Rolodex of venture capitalists I couldn't have accessed if I hacked their phones. I had code, vision, and a mind for systems that didn't sleep. It was a match built on ambition. We launched Apex out of a 2-room co-working space. I worked 18-hour days writing neural net protocols while Graham flew to pitch meetings in San Francisco and Boston. At first it worked. We were complementary. He was the mouth, I was the machine. Investors liked his charisma, but they always circled back when we landed our first seed round, $850,000, 0 cents, from an angel investor network. He toasted to the man behind the math. I believed him then. In the early years, we made every decision together, hiring engineers, shaping the roadmap, even naming the company. He insisted I be called co-founder and CTO, said it was important that we build the brand on credibility. But over time, the cracks appeared. Interviews in Wired started crediting Graham exclusively. Photos of our team cropped me out entirely. When I asked, he'd laugh and blame the editors. Does it really matter? We both know who built it. Still, I let it slide, partly out of loyalty, partly because I was more comfortable in the shadows. But it wasn't just a branding oversight, it was the beginning of erasure, and I didn't see it until it was almost too late. The man who once lifted my work to the world had started packaging it as his own, and I, too distracted in my lab, missed the shift from partner to pawn. At first, it was small things, little administrative corrections that seemed harmless. My title on the company website was changed from co-founder and CTO to simply head of technical operations. Graham said it was just a streamlining choice for clarity during investor reviews. Fewer words, tighter brand, he claimed. I nodded, half listening while debugging a calibration error in our neural input model. Then came the meetings I wasn't invited to, last-minute VC touch base, he'd explain. You'd hate the small talk anyway. And maybe I would have, but I still noticed the pattern. Every high-value investor call now happened without me. The Apex culture started shifting around him. New hires were brought in without my consultation. One day, a junior dev introduced me to a new partner from a robotics firm with, "Hey, this is Eli. He handles our servers. The lab I built from scratch, the entire neural integration framework I'd authored, reduced to a title that sounded like I ran a help desk." When I confronted Graham about it, he laughed it off. "Come on, man. You know how people are. You're the genius. I'm just making sure you don't have to deal with the politics." But it wasn't politics. It was calculated. Slowly, strategically, he was pulling my name from the architecture of the company. Internal presentations listed him as the sole executive. Product update memos, once co-signed, now bore only his initials. And when a Forbes tech feature listed him as counter-architect of Apex Neural Systems, I knew it wasn't just carelessness anymore. It was rewriting. Then came the office move. Our original side-by-side corner offices were consolidated into one. Graham kept his. I was moved to the server lab, glass-walled, open, exposed. "You're close to your tools now," he joked. Makes sense, right? That day, I boxed up the award I'd received from Innovation Media Lab for Innovation in Neural AI, but I started paying closer attention because the man who once toasted to our shared vision was now building something quietly, methodically, and he was making sure I wouldn't be part of it. The discovery came by accident, or maybe it was instinct. I'd noticed irregular bandwidth usage in our offsite servers, a spike in data transfers that didn't align with any logged updates. I traced the activity back to a private folder on our secure system, one only 2 people had admin level clearance to access, Graham and me. The contents were encrypted, but encryption has always been more of a suggestion to me. After 2 hours and a custom script, I cracked it open. What I found wasn't just mismanagement, it was betrayal, laid out in clean, well-organized files. Inside the folder was a full roadmap for a new company, NeuroGrid Ventures. It mirrored Apex's platform architecture almost identically, but rebranded and streamlined for private acquisition. Graham wasn't just building a competitor, he was cloning the core, the CTO, Derek Sims, an old college friend of his I hadn't seen in over a year. I read through the pitch decks, investor target lists, projected migration plans. Clients we'd worked with for years were being earmarked for quiet transition to NeuroGrid once the launch went live. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sent a discreet message to Rosalind Vega, our lead accountant, the only other person I trusted with numbers. We met the next morning in the basement supply closet under the guise of inventory checks. "You were right to ask," she whispered, showing me the report on her tablet. Monthly transfers to a shell corp registered under Sims's name, listed as consulting retainer. Nothing I could trace until now. And then there was Marina. She was quiet, but sharp, one of the new developers Graham barely acknowledged. After a product demo, she stayed behind and said softly, "I know what he's doing to you. He took credit for a feature I wrote. I tracked the commit logs. He pushed my code using his credentials." Her voice was steady, but her jaw clenched. "He's not just erasing you. He's training us to believe." That was the moment it all clicked. Graham wasn't just pushing me out. He was preparing to bury me beneath the surface of his new empire. He thought I'd stay buried. What he didn't realize was that I just unearthed the blueprint for his downfall, and I was going to use it. It was time to stop reacting and start building my counterattack. I called Leo Ramirez that night, my old roommate from MIT, now a corporate attorney specializing in intellectual property and co-founder disputes. We met at a quiet diner off South Congress, the kind of place with sticky menus and bottomless coffee. I laid out everything, the data theft, the shell company payments. Leo didn't say a word until I was done. Then he pushed his glasses up his nose and said, "You still have your original operating agreement?" I nodded. "Good," he said, grinning. "Let's bury this bastard legally." The next day, I pulled out the physical binder we had signed 5 years ago, back when we still believed in shared vision. Leo combed through every clause until he found it. Section 944B, any material transfer of intellectual property, equity redistribution, or business structure modification requires documented approval and signed consent from all founding parties. He read aloud, tapping the page. This clause is gold, Eli. It means he can't sell, spin off, or restructure anything without your signature. And if he's already done so, that's breach of contract and bad faith operation. That was only the beginning. We filed a quiet motion to place a legal hold on all Apex asset transfers and IP licensing. Leo drafted a cease and desist order for any activity tied to Neurogrid Ventures. But we didn't send anything yet, not until we were ready. This had to be surgical. I wanted Graham's confidence bloated to its bursting point. I wanted him walking into that boardroom on the day of the Harris pitch thinking he owned the world, just so I could take it from him. Meanwhile, I started laying my own traps. I began preparing the paperwork that would legally transfer 55% controlling interest back to me based on a clause Graham had signed 6 months ago during a rushed compliance update, bundled in a stack of documents I'd intentionally buried under vendor paperwork. He hadn't even read it. That was the fatal flaw. He assumed I was just the IT guy. He forgot that I designed every system in our company, including the fine print. By the time Leo and I had finished assembling the legal arsenal, I had everything I needed. Proof of fraud, IP theft, breach of contract, and a reactivation clause that would make me majority stakeholder. All I had to do now was wait for Graham to walk into his own trap, with his best shirt pressed, his smile polished, and no idea the ground beneath him was about to collapse. The beauty of being underestimated is that no one sees you coming. Over the next 3 weeks, I mastered the art of invisibility. I kept my head down, ran diagnostics, nodded through meetings, and pretended not to notice when Graham forgot to include me on executive emails. At night, while the office lights dimmed and the city of Austin pulsed beyond my apartment window, I devoured case law, corporate governance clauses, and digital forensics guides. I wasn't just preparing to fight, I was preparing to win. Marina became my silent partner in the shadows. She accessed archived devlogs, pulled deleted commit histories, and cataloged every code contribution misattributed to Graham. Roz quietly assembled a spreadsheet tracing the financial diversions to Neurogrid Ventures, organized by date, account, and recipient. Every piece of the puzzle fit together. Meanwhile, I started frequenting a small rooftop cafe 4 blocks from Apex. That's where I met with Dominic Carter. It started innocently. He wanted to hear my ideas about future product iterations, but I could tell he suspected something deeper. His words were careful, but his eyes were sharp. "There's something about this company," he said over his espresso. I didn't confirm it, but I didn't deny it either. Instead, I asked him a question. If you knew the product came from someone else's hands, not the person who pitched it to you, would that change your support? Dominic held my gaze for a long moment. "It would matter," he said. "A lot." Back at the office, I started rebuilding. Quietly. I archived all original architecture models, backed up our entire neural sync database to a secure offline node, and changed access permissions. I fed Graham just enough data to keep him thinking I was still compliant, and when he proudly announced the upcoming board meeting with Harris Developments, I simply nodded, as if grateful to be included. I even offered to update the presentation slides. He smiled like a king indulging a servant. and I smiled right back, already knowing exactly which slide would destroy him. The morning of the Apex board meeting arrived, clear and cool, the Texas sky streaked with gold. I dressed deliberately. Black blazer, gray button down, no tie, clean, quiet, unassuming. Graham, by contrast, arrived in full campaign mode. Navy suit, pocket square, freshly cut hair. He moved through the halls like a man stepping into his coronation. Let's make it shine. I nodded, polite as ever, holding the USB drive in my pocket like a dagger sheathed in velvet. The boardroom hummed with low conversation as the senior members of Apex took their seats. Dominic Carter arrived with 2 executives from Harris Developments in tow, and the energy shifted. Graham stood at the head of the table, beaming as he welcomed everyone. "This is the beginning of a new era," he said. "Apex is ready to expand, and I'm proud to introduce our next big leap, NeuroGrid Ventures." He clicked through his slides, showcasing product mock-ups, rollout timelines, and a glistening office space in San Jose. The numbers were optimistic, unrealistically so, but dressed in enough jargon to seem impressive. No one questioned him. Not yet. Then came the kicker. To streamline leadership and drive aggressive growth, we've restructured our equity distribution. That was my cue. I stood slowly, drawing every eye in the room. "Actually," I said, "those packets are invalid." Graham froze. "I beg your pardon?" I stepped forward, placing my own folders in front of each board member. "The documents you received contain unauthorized equity redistributions, misappropriated IP, and fraudulent signatures. And according to Apex's original operating agreement, Section 949, confusion erupted. Dominic flipped through the folder, his face darkening as he read the highlights. "These dates match your recent presentations, Graham," he said coldly, "but the numbers don't. And the source code? This is Apex Tech." Graham's face drained of color. "This is insane. He's just the IT guy." "No," Dominic said quietly, setting the folder down. "He's the co-founder, and you've been lying." I stepped beside the projector and inserted my drive. On the screen appeared a paper trail, emails between Graham and Sims, payment logs, metadata from stolen architecture files. "You didn't just plan to cut me out," I said. "You cloned my work, repackaged it, and tried to sell it to our clients under a new name." I turned to the board. "You've been pitched a company that doesn't legally exist, built with stolen IP by a man who no longer holds controlling interest in this one." Silence fell like a dropped gavel. For the first time in years, Graham didn't have a comeback. He just stood there, mouth slightly open, as the illusion of control shattered around him. The board called a recess that felt more like a reckoning. Graham was asked to step out of the room. He didn't argue, just grabbed his folder with trembling fingers and walked out like a man trying not to fall apart in front of a crowd. For the next 30 minutes, I answered every question with receipts. Co-founder documentation, notarized copies of our original agreement, signed compliance amendments, forensic logs showing IP theft, and financial reports. There was no room for spin. The facts weren't just damning, they were decisive. When the board reconvened, the decision was unanimous. Effective immediately, Graham was removed as CEO, pending legal review. A temporary injunction was placed on NeuroGrid Ventures for IP theft and misappropriation of company resources. Apex's leadership was placed in corrective realignment, and I was named interim CEO. There were no cheers, no congratulations, just nods of quiet respect, the kind given to someone who had survived something ugly and come out sharper on the other side. Dominic approached me afterward, hands clasped behind his back. "You played the long game," he said. "Remind me never to underestimate a man who built his empire from command lines." I offered a small smile. "You won't need to. I'll be leading the Harris rollout myself, on the real platform, the one I run. By the end of the day, Graham's keycard was deactivated, his name scrubbed from the company directory. Marina was promoted to head of development. Roz, with her quiet precision, stepped into the CFO role she'd always deserved. I walked into the office that once belonged to him, set my nameplate down on the desk, and opened my laptop. This time, I wouldn't be hidden behind the code. Weeks later, I found Graham's old nameplate tucked in the back of a desk drawer. I had it framed and hung it on the wall of my home office, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder of silence mistaken for weakness, of credit stolen, and of the power that lies in watching, waiting, and then striking with precision. Apex thrived under new leadership, and as a Stripe exhaled, as I updated our global roadmap, I smiled to myself. Some systems rebuild quietly, others reboot with intent. Digital Access is a story about quiet resilience, strategic patience, and reclaiming stolen ground. Eli Navarro's journey teaches us that being underestimated is not a weakness. It's a weapon in the right hands. Power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it codes in silence, waits in shadows, and strikes with evidence. The real lesson? Never overlook the person behind the curtain. Those who build the foundations are often the ones best equipped to bring down the tower. When betrayal cuts deep, don't just react. Plan, learn, prepare, and when the moment is ripe, step into the light and take back what's yours with clarity, confidence, and no need for vengeance disguised as chaos, just truth. If Eli's story gave you that satisfying yes moment, the kind where the underdog finally rises, like this story, subscribe for more sharp, revenge-driven narratives and share it with anyone who's ever been underestimated. Because sometimes the best way to fight back is to rewrite the code.